Now, while you're watching this video, please remember to like, subscribe to my channel, click the bell icon for notification of future videos, and share this video also. Thank you.
Full obedience as best as we can.
Yeah.
And that's important. I'm not going to back down from the idea that if you're convicted about the Sabbath, you really ought to keep it, like, because God has convicted you of it.
Sure.
And like,
Yeah.
who am I to say that you go against your convictions one way or the other?
And we're
And so,
agreement on that. Romans 14
yeah,
talks about that, right? Let each man be fully convinced in his own mind. One man sees one day as being sacred. Another man sees all days are alike. Let each man be fully convinced in his own mind. And I think obviously Paul was writing that because the church at Rome and many of the churches of that day, they were merging together or fusing together two very, very different cultures. You have the Gentile culture, which knew nothing about the Sabbath and respected the Sabbath not. And then you have the Jewish culture where, they obviously withheld or upheld the Sabbath to a high standard. And Paul was trying to build unity in the churches, and he didn't want these things to further divide the brothers in Christ. And so that's why he wrote chapters like Romans 14, where it says, hey, you know what? If you're a Jewish Christian and you want to observe the Sabbath and you want to, there's nothing wrong with that. There's everything right with that. It's good to take a day of the week and say, I'm going to rest. I'm not going to work. I'm going to spend time with my family. I'm going to worship. I'm going to pray. That's honorable and it should be done. And it's amazing. It's a date night with Jesus. I respect that 100%. But then Paul is like, hey, but you know what? If somebody else sees all days alike and maybe they want to do that on Sunday or on Monday or Tuesday, and hey, you know what? We are free. We're not under law. We're under grace. We all have freedom now to be able to, rest on our own terms, if you will. So I think we can move past that one. Justin,
well,
thank you. Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, that is one that I'm getting in trouble if I don't actually respond to with my
Okay.
community.
Sure.
I don't think that's actually what Paul teaches in that passage in Romans. If you do a word study of the entire book of Romans, surprisingly absent is the word Sabbath. Literally not once does the word Sabbath show up in the book of Romans. I don't think that that's actually what he is intending to say with that passage. I don't believe that Paul is talking about which Sabbath, or is Saturday or Sunday or Wednesday or any other day the Sabbath day. That I don't think that that's what he's talking about. I think Adventists generally believe that he's talking about other feast days, other important days, whether it's fasting or feasting or other kinds of ceremonial days, those kinds of things. He's saying in those areas, those are things that make up kind of cultural Judaism. Don't let that be a stumbling block between you and the Gentiles. To that point, that's kind of where we see that applying. But I don't see precedent for Paul saying, hey, any day works. Every day is kind of created equal. Choose 1 in 7. The testimony of Scripture and the testimony of history is that at least till the 1st or 2nd century AD, there was unity in that Saturday was the day of gathering and worship. It wasn't until later on Constantine came on, and more as like a political move to distance Christianity from Judaism, there was kind of a transfer, quote unquote, of the solemnity of Sabbath to Sunday. So I would disagree with you, and we can move on if you want or dig deeper into that. But Adventists would not feel that using Romans to say that any day is fine, that would rub a lot of Adventists the wrong way.
Sure. And I definitely think that, along with the Colossians 2 passage, about
I would have to say something about Colossians 2, but then we're getting into a more nuanced theological discussion.
Yeah. And that's why
so
I say
it's up to you where you want to take that.
Yeah, I'd say let's move on to
Yes, so as you can see by that interview with Justin Cole and Alan Parr, Justin Cole pointed out some arguments or reasons as to why the Sabbath is not in view in Romans chapter 14. Now what I'm going to do, I'm going to read from a book called All Foods Are Clean and Every Day is a Sabbath. From this book, we'll hear similar arguments from one of their top scholars that goes by the name of Samuel Bakayoko. You understand? The argument that Samuel Bakayoko uses, however, is fast days. You understand? And the reason for using this, and not saying feast days, is because feast days, to say that this is feast or one of those ceremonial days and so forth, it's a much weaker argument to use, honestly. And as I get down into the video, you will see why. So he chooses to use the argument of it being fast days, you understand, and not the days of the in the Old Testament, not the rituals and so forth, you understand? Not the days or feasts of the fast of the Old Testament, but rather fast days, which is a stronger argument, but that one can't work either. You understand? And as we get down into the video, you will see why. Now, with that being said, let me get down into the book, right? Chapter 3 of the book, All Foods Are Clean. Bakioki contended that the day referred to in Romans 14 verse 5 to 6 is not the Sabbath day, but rather they are fasting that believers regarded with different opinions. He buttressed his position by referring to chapter 8 of the Didache, in which Christians were instructed to fast on Wednesday and Friday to differentiate themselves from Jews who fasted on Tuesday, to differentiate themselves from Jews who fasted on Tuesday and Thursday. As we examine the evidence, you will notice that there was never a controversy in the Gospels nor in the early church about days of fasting. Sorry guys. Oh my. Now, when he refers to days of fasting here in the early church, you don't find that. I suppose he's talking in the book of Acts, right? You don't find anything in it about days of fasting nor in the gospel. And then he said, neither can the reference in the Didache be interpolated into Romans 14. Therefore, Romans 14 cannot be speaking about fasting, demonstrating that the Sabbath is in view. Now I'm going to skip a page and cite where further what Bakioki says about the Didache. As part of his polemic, Bakioki elicited evidence from the Didache to sustain his position that Romans 14 is a reference to fast days. He stated the reference over days in Romans 14 presumably had to do with fast days rather than feast days, since the context deals with abstinence from meat and wine. And he quotes Romans 14 verse 2, 6 and 21. Support for this view is provided by the Didache, chapter 8, which enjoins Christians to fast on Wednesday and Friday rather than on Monday and Thursday like the Jews. So in response to this, Else wrote, the Didache does state, but as for your fast, let them not be with the hypocrites, for they fast. No, this is not Elsie here. He's citing what is actually written in the Didache, should say. So he says the Didache does state, but as for your fast, let them not be with the hypocrites, for they fast on the 2nd and 5th days of the week. But do ye fast on the 4th and 6th days, right? At first glance, it appears that this analysis and conclusion is accurate because indeed a controversy did occur between Jews and Christians with regards to fast days. But upon analyzing the dating of Romans and the Didache, it becomes clear that the day of Romans 14 and the fast days of the Didache are anachronistic and unrelated. Therefore, the statement from the Didache cannot be read into Romans 14. So what Elsie did afterwards now, is to show the dates when the book of Romans was written and the date when the Didache was written. Now, based on his book, the evidence that he shows here suggests that the Didache may have been written either between in somewhere in the middle 50s, AD 50s. So it could be late 55 or early 56 or late 56 or early 57. Anywhere from there tracing to AD 60s. You understand? The Didache, however, based on research, and he shows the evidence, he cites where the source come from. It may have been written in the 1st century AD or early 2nd century or after. And even if it is dated in the 70s, that is still telling evidence. So basically, what the evidence shows is that the Didache was something that was written after Romans, after the book of Romans. I know I've said this before, that the timing of when things are written is very important. If the controversy with the Jews over days of fasting and so forth occurred after Romans 14 was written, naturally Paul could not have been talking about it. There's no way he could be talking about it, because he can't be talking about an issue that doesn't exist. You understand? That issue occurred after Romans 14 was written based on evidence. As a result of this, the Didache cannot be used, you understand, as a basis to say, hey, the Jews, it could have been days of fasting that it's talking about. No. So that one can't work, none at all. That is actually a better argument to use, rather than say that it could probably talk in feast days, as what Justin Coe is saying. So Justin Coe mentioned two things, either the feast days are ceremonial days or ceremonial Sabbaths. That's what he's talking. Either it's talking that, or it's talking fast days. But nowhere in Romans chapter 14, you understand, does the word Sabbath occur at all in it. So therefore, it cannot be talking that. Right? This is what he's actually saying. But here's a problem with what Justin Coe is saying. He says that it could possibly be one of the ceremonial Sabbaths or ceremonial days. But it couldn't be the Sabbath, because nowhere in the passage does Sabbath occur. I'm telling you that Seventh-day Adventists, their inconsistencies knows no bounds. In Romans chapter 14, not only does the word Sabbath doesn't, or the Greek word for Sabbath doesn't appear, none at all in Romans 14, but we don't find Romans 14 referencing to any of the ceremonial days or ceremonial Sabbath, none of the feasts. So how is it that he could assume that it could be talking one of those days, right? While it is not mentioned any at all in Romans 14. None of what he's saying. No rituals, none of the rituals are none of the ceremonial Sabbaths, their quote-unquote ceremonial Sabbaths, or feast days is referenced in it. Yet he can say that it could possibly be talking it. And at the same time, he's saying that it can't be talking Sabbath because Sabbath is not mentioned in it. But how then, if that's the case, why is it that it's talking the feast days when feast is not mentioned in it either? You see how inconsistent and biased they can be with their reasoning. That's bias, That is bias. You won't accept that it's a Sabbath because the Sabbath is not mentioned in it. But yet still, you believe that it's talking one of those feasts and so forth, and yet still, feast is not mentioned in Romans 14 either. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to use his very own arguments. That is Justin Coe. I'm going to use his very own arguments against him and the SDA Church, basically. He's saying that it could possibly be one of the feast days. Right? Because they believe, they are one of the ceremonial Sabbaths. They believe that the Sabbath is a ceremonial law, and not a moral law. I have a video on that where I show that the Sabbath is a ceremonial law. So if you think that it's one of those ceremonial days or Sabbaths, then it should be the weekly Sabbath mentioned in it, because the Sabbath is a ceremonial law. You understand? I'll post the video showing that the Sabbath is a ceremonial law in the comment section. But let's talk about the feast now. He says that it could possibly be one of the feasts. You understand? But it can't be the weekly Sabbath. If I can show that the weekly Sabbath is a feast day, then by his own argument that it could be one of the feasts, then it should be possible that the Sabbath could be one of the days spoken there. Because if he says that it's one of the feasts, then I don't see why you would have any qualms with the Sabbath being mentioned there, because the Sabbath is a feast. That is if I can prove that the Sabbath is a feast now. Now turn with me to Leviticus chapter 23. Leviticus chapter 23 will show this clearly. You understand? Leviticus 23. And the Lord spake unto Moses, saying, Speak unto the children of Israel, and say unto them, Concerning the feast of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be holy convocation, even these are my feasts. Verse 3, 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th day is a Sabbath of rest and holy convocation. Ye shall do no work therein. It is the Sabbath of the Lord in all your dwellings. Did you get that? Proclaim concerning the feast of the Lord, which ye shall proclaim to be what? Holy convocation. So these feasts are what? Holy convocations. Moses then began, or God then began to speak to tell Moses that 6 days work must be done, but the 7th is the day of the Sabbath of rest. Is a Sabbath of rest, and it is a holy convocation. So that's a parallel, of verse 2, that when he's talking about his holy convocation, these are my feasts. God then began to list out his holy convocations, which are his feasts. And the first one that come up on his list is the weekly Sabbath. For notice verse 3 said, 6 days shall work be done, but the 7th is the Sabbath of rest. Therefore the Sabbath, the weekly Sabbath, it is a feast day. Bam! Justin Cole is tied up with his very own argument. If he says that it's one of the feasts, then it's possible that the Sabbath is included, because the Sabbath is a feast. You understand? The Sabbath is a feast. So his argument failed in suggesting that it's one of the feasts. It could be one of the feasts, because if that's the case and the Sabbath is a feast, that means it could be the Sabbath day. You understand? If he says that one of the ceremonial Sabbaths, if I can prove that the Sabbath is a ceremonial law, you understand, there is no such thing as ceremonial Sabbaths, because all of the Sabbaths are ceremonial in nature, including the weekly one. If I can show that that the weekly Sabbath is also a ceremonial law together with those other Sabbaths, then he would have to agree that the weekly Sabbath, it is possible that it's the weekly Sabbath spoken of in Romans 14, which I prove already in my video, which is in the comment section, which I'll post, that the weekly Sabbath is a ceremonial law. So that can't work either. Neither can he resort to saying that it's one of the feasts, because if that's the case, the weekly Sabbath is possibly one of them there, since it's a feast. Neither can Bakioki's argument work either, because the Didache, it was written long after Romans 14. So it can't be fast days. And ironically, even without resorting to the Didache, at no time at all in the Bible was there ever a controversy or dispute about days of fasting. So as a result of that, there is no way it could be talking about days of fasting. No way. Now, with that being said, now I must prove, you understand, that it is the weekly Sabbath. Since I basically brushed off or refuted the arguments of them both, let me now prove to you that it's the weekly Sabbath spoken of in Romans 14. Right? Oh, I should add in that that where fasting is concerned, you don't find the Greek words for fasting. I'll post it on the screen. It doesn't appear in Romans 14, none at all. You understand? So while Justin Coe is right that the weekly Sabbath, it doesn't appear in it, but neither is fasting, because when you look at the Greek word for fasting, you understand, you'll find that you don't see it appear in Romans 14, just as you don't find the Greek word Sabbaton appear in Romans 14. You understand? So both parties would have to contextually show. He would have to contextually show why is it that Romans 14 could be talking about the Sabbath. Both parties, both those who believe that it's the Sabbath spoken of there, and both those who don't believe that it's the Sabbath spoken of there but could be fasting. You understand? It neither shows nothing that suggests fasting. You understand? In terms of Greek word, neither does it do so for Sabbath. But if I can contextually show that it lose the Sabbath, then it means that anti-Sabbatarians basically win this argument, in so to speak. You understand? So I'm going to prove it now. No, I'm not going to read all of Romans 14. I'm only going to cite the part that talks about mention about day. You can read the chapter for yourself. So Romans chapter 14 verse 5 to 6, reading from the NLT, New Living Translation, it reads thus: in the same way, some think one day is more holy than another day, while others think every day is alike. You should each be fully convinced that whichever day you choose is acceptable. Those who worship the Lord on a special day do it to honor Him. So if Sunday worshippers worship God on Sunday, they do it to honor Him. If persons worship God on Saturday, they do it to honor Him. Why? Because each person is to be fully convinced in their own mind whichever day is acceptable. You understand? So this is basically what we call it now, a conjunction. Verse 6 is a conjunction or a continuation of verse 5. So it's building up on the last sentence in verse 14. You should be fully convinced that whichever day you choose is acceptable. So once you choose which day is acceptable, if you worship the Lord on a special day, you do it to honor Him. So this is what Paul is actually saying here. You understand? Those who eat any kind of food do so to honor the Lord, since they give thanks to God before eating. You understand? That is those who choose to eat any kind of food, And those who refuse to eat certain food also want to please the Lord and give thanks to God. So by these two verses, Paul is giving allowance to eat any kind of food. You understand? And he's also giving allowance to worship on any day. You understand? By these two verses alone. Let me read again. Those who eat any kind of food do so to honor the Lord. Not to dishonor the Lord, As how persons would actually make it seem that when you eat certain food, you dishonor the Lord. Paul affirms that those who eat any kind of food honors the Lord in doing so. They eat it to honor the Lord, and God is honored. Why? Because food does not destroy the work of God. You understand? So in the same way, He gives allowance to persons to worship God on any day. You understand? Now let me prove, you understand, to the KJV only is because they would say, oh, you resorting to other translation, NLT is a mistranslation. Let me show you that the NLT translates it accurately. And how I'm going to do this? By reading from Romans chapter 15, which is a continuation of Romans 14. Notice Romans chapter 15 begins the same way as Romans 14 begins. Romans 14 verse 1 says, "In that is weak in the faith, receive ye, but not to doubtful disputations." Romans 15 verse 1 said, we then that are strong are to bear the infirmities of the weak, and not to please ourselves. So this is showing you that it is in fact a continuation of Romans 14, addressing weak believers. So Romans 14 addresses weak believers, and Romans 15 builds upon it, addressing again weak believers. You understand? And what it says about weak believers? We who are strong are to bear the infirmities of the weak, and not to please ourselves. Let every one of us please his neighbor to his good, for edification. For even Christ pleased not himself. But as it is written, the reproaches of them that reproach thee fell on me. For whatsoever things were written when? Aforetime were written for our learning, that we through patience and comfort of the scriptures might have hope. So when Paul says what was written aforetime, it's talking about long ago. That is Old Testament. By then, the Didache was nowhere ready, you understand, to be written. So you can't use the Didache at all, because based on the context, Paul is showing you just by verse 4 alone that he's talking about Old Testament. That is why I mentioned about what was written aforetime, in order to teach us. You understand? That we can learn from it. That through the scriptures, mentioning the scriptures again, this is even further evidence that you see, if he didn't mention scriptures, they would talk about some kind of writings. They dig up something and say some kind of things that were written then. That's what he's talking about. But the fact that Paul mentions scriptures here it is the Old Testament writings that Paul is talking about. And in those Old Testament writings, scriptures, you don't find no controversy about fast days. None. So I basically can end this video now. Can't talk about fast days because that's a point that I proven that cannot be used. You understand? If you say that it is talking about feast days, you understand, I prove that the Sabbath is a feast. So therefore the Sabbath should be included in the day that is mentioned there. Because the Sabbath is a feast. You understand? If you say that it's ceremonial laws, you understand, then the Sabbath is a ceremonial law. You understand? I have a video on that, as I stated before. I put it in the comment section where I show that the Sabbath is a ceremonial law. So whichever argument they use, they have no way to say that it's not alluding to the Sabbath. So once Paul say, this day or that day, each one be convinced in his own mind, it means that days doesn't matter, none at all. Whoever chooses to worship God on this day or that day, do it in honor to the Lord, according to verse 6. So whoever worship God on Sunday, worship him in honor to the Lord. Likewise, those who worship on Saturday, worship God in honor to the Lord. You understand? Now you see why I say Romans 14 is a stronger text than Galatians 4. But trust me, next week you're going to be in for something. The strongest argument among them all. Colossians chapter 2. Stay tuned for it next week. Bye bye now.